Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that helps to get my channel promoted, and I appreciate it. I'd also love it if you'd leave a comment. It's nice to hear what you have to think about things. Every month on my Patreon, I give my group over there an idea for a topic, and sometimes it's abstract, sometimes it's sort of concrete, but like one time I gave them architecture, and another time I gave them kitchen stuff. But the idea is that sometimes thinking out of the box about things can inspire some kind of cool pieces. And this month I chose symbols or characters, and I thought I was going to do something simple but kind of really sleek and clean. I'm going to use the little no symbol, which is a circle with a line going through it, like on Ghostbusters. I think I know what I'm going to do with it, and I drew up a sketch, so we'll see how it turns out. So one of the exciting things is I'm an affiliate of Pepe Tools now, and I get to use my new Pepe Tools rolling mill. There's a link in my video description if you want to see some of the other kind of stuff that they have over there. It's really kind of nice. I want to thank my patrons on Patreon. They've been very generous in signing up for that, and I appreciate that, as well as the nice community that they've created over there. It's a great place with lots of knowledge and people exchanging ideas. I love it over there. So thanks for that, and I wanted to thank my YouTube subscribers. We passed 11,100, I believe was the last benchmark, and that's awesome. I can't believe that sometimes, but thank you for that, and thanks for all the nice little financial contributions like the super thanks and the buy me a coffees. Those really help with the rising cost of materials. I appreciate that. Thanks. All right, let's get started on this piece. This is my design idea book that I'm currently using. I have a number of different cover designs on my merch store if you're interested. I find it useful to sketch up designs in advance anymore. It helps me to kind of solidify ideas in my mind. This has a nice kind of a graph in the background, which helps me to keep things a little more consistent too, as I'm not terribly good at freehanding things. But this is what I had in mind here. So we got our little no symbol like that. I'm going to flip it sideways, and I'm going to fill in half of it with just a solid sheet. I'm going to have a round bail that I call a sandwich bail, which has a gap between it and kind of a spacer up here for the chain to go around. And it'll be sandwiched on either side of this piece, and so the chain will have a place to go through. This is going to be 10 gauge square wire, and I think this will be 18 gauge sheet. The trick is, I don't want this to overlap this. That would be one way to make sure I don't have a line here. But I'm going to try and get it to where I can solder these two together and you can't really see that seam anymore. So I'm going to do my best to do a good job on that. The back side of this sheet I'm going to texture. I was thinking this had some kind of sort of mid-century modern look to it. This is from my friend Paula in Hawaii, who has one of those laser cutters, and she made a bunch of these for me, which was very kind of her. Thank you, Paula. So I'm going to see how that works with the new rolling mill. So first, I think we're going to cut our piece of 10 gauge square, and I kind of calculated based on the diameter of this about how big a piece I needed, and minimum 113/64 to get that kind of a circumference. And so I cut one that was about 120, 125 millimeters out of this 10 gauge square, and I think we're going to try and shape it. So this kind of square wire is pretty thick and hard to bend, so I'm going to use this little, this is a little wooden mandrel I made on my lathe. It's kind of in between the size of a bracelet mandrel and a ring mandrel, so sometimes you have something that's kind of right in the middle there. It's nice to have that sort of thing. But one thing you have to think about when you're bending square wire is it tries to find the easiest way to bend, and the easiest way for square wire to bend is if it's diagonal. And so when I go to bend it with the flat side inwards, it's going to try and twist on me. So you can use whatever kind of pliers you want to get it started. Sometimes if you have these nylon jawed pliers, they're kind of handy for that. We can get a kind of a shape going like this just by using some leverage. But I'm kind of watching that twist to make sure it doesn't twist too much. Stop periodically. You can see it's kind of like turning inwards that way a little bit. So if we stop it, kind of torque it a little bit. I usually cut things a little bit longer than they need to be. I'd rather have too much than not enough. I'm going to get it roughly round and lay it over this to see how close we are. See how good my math was. I don't have to get it perfectly round at this stage. I just need to check the size and solder it together, after which we can round it out a little bit better. So I'm kind of going to overlap it a little bit. Quite a bit bigger, so we're going to go smaller. Overlap it a little further. I'm going to need a little piece of square, 10 gauge square for this little spacer up here anyway, so whatever we cut off of here we can probably use for that. A little bit smaller yet. If you have a ring bender, that would probably work for this too. I think anyway. I've never had a ring bender. As my hands get older, I don't have quite as much hand strength as I used to. We're getting pretty close here. I'm going to get these pretty well lined up, and then I'm going to use my saw to cut a nice line through both of them. And that'll get me pretty good. So let's go do that real quick. Put a little lubrication on my blade here. See that sweet rolling mill? It's so much nicer than my previous one. Okay. Make sure you can see what I'm doing here. Let's just go straight through about right there. I'm going to go ahead and give this a couple of strokes on the file to make sure it's pretty flat. I don't care so much if it's perfectly circular right this second while I'm soldering it, because we're going to round it out again after we get it all soldered together. If you haven't been to my channel before, I use almost 100% of the time hard sheet solder. I also use a liquid flux called My-T-Flux, although I have some new flux I'm going to be trying out pretty soon that's supposed to be anti-fire scale. We'll see how it works. So let's flux this right here. Quite a bit of mass in this, so I'm going to heat the entire piece pretty evenly. When you're doing something like this, if you get one side up to temperature one side of the gap there up to temperature before the other side, you tend to see to jump to the side that's hot enough for it to flow. So ideally you want them to both reach that solid temperature about the same time. Okay, I'm going to spend a minute kind of reshaping this so it's all on the same plane. That's pretty round. Let's just do this a little bit to make sure we have a relatively flat ring with no waves. Sometimes doing what I'm doing here by filing across the whole thing, it kind of reveal any spots that are raised or lower, because they won't file cleanly like that. Looks like I'm actually pretty flat. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lightly smooth out the inside here with my rotary tool with an abrasive white wheel, abrasive silicone white wheel, which will kind of smooth it out without removing a lot of material. So I'll be right back. So I kind of need to find the center point of this. This center finder, which was also from Pepe Tools, which has proved to be pretty useful. Allow me to find the intersection of half of the circle. Let's find out where there's the solder joint right there. Let's put the solder joint up at the top, maybe. So this will be the top then, over here to the side. That's about where I want that to go to. So since I'm gonna texture one side of this sheet, I'm gonna cut a little piece that's at least this big, like that. And then we'll, when we roll it through the rolling mill, it's gonna compress it a little bit, so it'll make it slightly bigger, but I think we'll have plenty. And then we can actually kind of trace out the curve on this and cut it out with a saw, I think. So let's flatten this back out a little bit. That should give me plenty. These are Fisker's craft shears, and this is about as thick as you can cut with them. Even this is rough on them, probably. But they're cheap, and you'll be surprised how long they last before they break. I'm going to put a sacrificial piece of brass or copper behind it, but let's make a mark where the edges are so I can just kind of tape it to it. Or should I do it diagonally? What do you think? I kind of think maybe. Let's do it diagonally, just for fun. So I grab my masking tape. I'm going to position it just kind of like there. I don't want to have a thicker spot on here, so if I'm using tape to hold it all together, I should. You can always grab your rusty X-Acto knife. That looks pretty good. Okay, let's go over to the rolling mill and see if we can't put a little impression on that. Usually put it in just a little ways. This. Starts to feel snug. Since I have so many layers of things, I'm going to crank it, pretty tight so that I get a good impression on there. Well, let's pull it apart and see how it did. Hey, we got a pretty good one on there, I think. Hopefully you can see that. I like that. That's nice. Nice rolling mill. Thank you so much, Pepe Tools. It's so much better than my old one. All right, let's go back over to the other table again. I want to make sure nothing moves around when I'm tracing this. And so I think I'm going to tape this sheet to the table like this. And maybe tape this to the sheet as well, because I want it to fit in there perfectly. So one thing I can do to make sure I get a good sharp line is I can color this with a marker. Let that dry off for a minute. If you watched my weaving video the other day, I ran this through the half round roller part of the combo mill there, and it really made this nice and symmetrical. So I'm going to be doing some of that probably too with some weaving. So I'm going to tape this down also. Take a T-pin like this, make sure nothing's moving, and I'm just going to trace that inside edge. So we should be able to see hopefully you can see that on camera, but it's got a nice clean line there. So now we'll go back and saw that out. We'll see if my sawing skills are up for it. I believe I have a 0 on here, and that's probably fine for this one. See how my sawing skills are today. That wasn't too shabby for me. Sawing is not my strongest suit, but I think that turned out okay. Okay, I'll just use the file to clean it up, and we'll go see if we can solder that in. I did a little tiny bit of filing, and I think it's in there pretty nicely. So I think I'm going to solder that in now. I was going to use this pad, but I think it's not flat enough anymore. So I'm going to try and use this honeycomb pad, because that has a relatively new surface, so that should leave it pretty clean. Well, first let me clean some of this off with some acetone. So I think what I'm going to do in order to prevent a lot of the solder flowing into the pattern on the back is I'm going to place some solder right underneath this bottom edge here. So let's do that. It may be kind of hard to see with the video resolution that I have right now, but I've tucked a piece of solder underneath this thing so that, well, several pieces of solder I should say, so that they should be touching the back of the sheet as well as this square wire. Now let's dribble some flux on there after we get this going and we'll see how it works. We can always go back and add some if we need to. I think let's cool that off and take a peek at it and see how it looks. So I think that'll be fine. I don't see any seam gaps. Get it cleaned up a little bit better as we go. Kind of wanted to have a border at the top on this right here. I'm thinking probably use some more of that 10 gauge. So I was originally going to sweat some solder onto the back of this, but I think it might be hard to get it to sit down if I do that. So I'm going to pick some solder onto this side over here once I have everything all lined up where I want it. I think that'll work best, and that'll prevent a lot of bleed going through to the other side where the pattern is. So I'll do my best that way. If you've never seen pick soldering before, I'll put a video up there for you. It's a super useful skill, and it kind of moved my abilities to a different level. The real trick to pick soldering is not sticking this in there too soon. let's take a peek at it and see how it looks. Okay, I'm going to spend a little time filing this flat so that that doesn't stick up anymore. I'll be right back. So after quite a bit of filing, I got it pretty much smoothed out like that. And I didn't quite get the top as well as I'd like, but I'll clean that up with a Dremel probably later. I have this little bit of square wire left over, and I'm going to set that right on the edge of this disc. I cut these discs out with my disc cutter. You just punch them out with the hammer, and it's got a little peg and a hole. So these ones are, let's see, they're about 12 millimeters, I think. So I'm going to solder this onto this one side here, and then shape it so it's got kind of a smooth curve with my rotary tool, so the chain will pass nicely around it. And then we'll put a spacer over here to hold this one up, and we'll solder this one right above it. So let's do that. So like I said, I'm just going to kind of curve this with my rotary tool over there. I'll be right back. Got a little curved on the inside there, and I'm going to sweat a little bit of solder right here. So I'll pick up one or two of these pieces and pre-melt them on there. Place this over here as a spacer, and then we'll flex this, and then we'll set that right on top of that. Then we can remove this and slide it right over the top of this thing once we figure out the exact center. And then we'll be done except for pickling and polishing. So let's sweat a little bit of solder on there. I'm going to try to get this positioned nicely, because the hardest part for me on stuff like this is getting it centered right. Okay, let's try that and see how that works. Okay. I call these sandwich bales because they kind of like two pieces of bread around something else. When I pick it on, I'm going to pick it on over here at first so it doesn't move much. It's actually where the solder joint is, where I soldered the circle closed, the 10 gauge square circle. So there's probably enough solder there to actually stick it down, but I'd rather make sure. Now this is one of those situations we've developed quite a bit of mass across the whole of this piece. It's easy to be tempted to just focus up here, but this whole piece needs to get up to the temperature that we need it to be for this solder to really stick to it. So it's important to keep the entire piece. That's one of those things that people don't quite get at the beginning sometimes. Let's flip it back upside down so it can't move. Just get it to float. That way this thing won't move out of position and be not flat against the surface. That's my idea anyway. Take a peek. Looks like we had good flowage. Like after this is all cleaned up, I will clean up the top of that, and then we'll have our nice kind of smooth sandwich bale. So let's make sure everything's straight. It's pretty straight to me. Let's see, I guess. Let's let that clean up. Alright, be back in a bit. Alright, so I got everything all polished up. There's the front side of it. I'm pretty pleased with how that came out. It's reasonably symmetrical and got nice clean lines. And then here's the back side. So, you can wear it either way. Alright, I'll take some nice pictures and put them at the end. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the like button before you leave. And leave a comment. Let me know what you think. The other thing is, check out some of my other videos. I have 310 plus videos now, all different levels, skill-wise, and lots of different ideas for projects. So check a few of those out, subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to visit the video description down below. There's some important links down there. First and foremost, there's a safety link, so you should always follow safety protocols when you're doing stuff like this. The next link is a Pepe Tools affiliate link, so if you click that and then buy something over there, that helps me out a lot, so make sure to check that out. They have a great inventory of really nice tools, so I'm really pleased with some of the ones I've gotten from them. So there's some other links to support the channel if you're interested. There's a merch store link if you want to get yourself one of those nice design idea books, or a wine tumbler, or a funny coffee mug. There's a link to my website if you want to check out some jewelry I've made. There's a link to the Buy Me a Coffee if you want to help me out with a little cash infusion for supplies. And finally, there's a link to my Patreon if you want to become part of that group. So check out the different tiers on that. It's a great place. So thanks for watching. Happy silversmithing. Take care.